Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me again. In today's lesson, we're going to look at how to navigate playing lead over one of my very favourite progressions, a classic blues turnaround, fully harmonised of course. It's amazing how much rich and colourful harmony there is hiding under the surface of such a short and supposedly simple progression. But we're going to bring that stuff to the surface today, and in turn add a lot of range and dynamism to our blues playing. As usual, we'll begin by outlining the changes, and this will become somewhat of a roadmap or improvisation guide in terms of knowing what to play and where. And we'll be using a handful of different elements to express ourselves over this progression. This will include the blues scale, some dominant 7th and minor 6th arpeggios, some simple triads, and a rather spicy whole half diminished scale. All in all, this will be a useful lesson to those of you looking to add some subtle jazzy touches to your blues soloing. Think Robben and Larry Carlton. As ever, the lesson materials for this are going to be very thorough, tab and notation in Guitar Pro and PDF formats, not only for the lead playing but for the chord progression underneath, as well as my backing track. Also, I embed the audio file into the Guitar Pro file, which makes for some truly interactive sheet music. You can get hold of all of this by going to the links in the description, where you can join my Patreon for just $10 a month, and that gives you access to all of my lessons, past, present and future. Or you can go to the Gumroad link and pick this up as a one-off purchase. Either way, thanks for your support. Okay, enough talk. Let's get into the progression. So the foundation for all of this is a simple blues turnaround in the key of G. Here are two prime examples. Now, as we know with music, very little happens outside of the context of harmony. So let's look at the implied progression that's happening with that sort of a turnaround. You could be thinking G7, G diminished, C minor 6, back to G. So that would be like the 1 diminished, the 4 minor, back to the 1. Really beautiful sounding turnaround. So in short, if we took this fleshed it out a little bit, we'd get this. G7, G diminished 7, C minor 6, G. For the rhythm part in our backing here, we're just going to look at various ways to navigate those changes. First of all, we're going to play G7 here off the A string. Now, one good way of looking at this progression is that you've got these three notes here on strings D, G and B, and these are going to move down chromatically for the first three steps, all while retaining a G bass note. So this would be the result of doing that. G7, G diminished 7, C minor 6 with G in the bass, and then we adapt things for the final chord and end up on a G major chord here. Root, 3rd, 5th, root. So like a G major triad first inversion with that G pedal note down in the bass. Now we're going to play it again, but down in the lower register, G7 down here. Now again, if we look for that little pattern and see if we can simplify our thinking, you've got these three notes, these are going to move down chromatically, and then change shape for the final triad on the open strings. Keep the G in the bass throughout, and you get this, G7, G diminished 7, C minor 6 with G in the bass, G major. And then finally we're going to go all the way up to here and play a G7 with a D in the bass. So this time it's not the bass note that's going to stay static, it's going to be the top note, because that's where our G is. While the rest of the shape moves down chromatically and then adapts for the G major triad at the end. Add that G on top. Nice. Okay, so that's the chord part established. Now let's get into what I improvised over that and break it down. As always, with my lessons, I try and incorporate some kind of a progression of difficulty throughout the piece, or from simple to complicated in terms of concepts. And this one's no different. To begin with, we're just going to outline things with quite broad strokes, using, for the majority of the time, a G blues scale. Okay, so over the first two bars of our progression, so the G7 and the G diminished 7 chords, we're going to play this. So all of these notes are in the G blues scale, but we do favour notes that are in the chord. So we're thinking G7, flat 7 to the root, then slide up to the minor third and give it a little bend to hint at the major third. And throughout this solo, we're going to be adding a lot of expression through some little nuances and little touches. In this case, one of those late pull-offs from 12 to 10, where we cut the note off immediately, so a staccato sound. Something I've spoken about a lot in my other blues videos. Now as the C minor approaches, we play this. Which again is G blues scale, right? Double stop here with a bend on the B string, and then come down the scale. But again, we favour notes that are in the chord. So this note here, C, is landing right on beat 1 of the C minor 6. Hitting those changes directly like that is what's going to bring melody into your playing. And this is stuff that has to be very considered and purposeful to begin with, but it does happen naturally over time if you practice doing that plenty. Because obviously you've got to map out where those notes are first in order to be able to find them, and then eventually your ear will lead the way. Another one of those late pull-offs, and then we're thinking about getting back to G using the G blues scale, but then bringing in notes from a G major triad, again to resolve right down on beat 1 of the G chord, minor to major third, and then the root on top. And then we're going to play a nice little phrase where I'm really thinking of this G major arpeggio and finding ways to access that major third without directly fretting it, bending into it from a semitone below, putting in the fourth before that as well, and down the triad, root and fifth, flat 7, back to the root. So if we want to get a little nerdy about that, we could say that we're using an enclosure around the major third there, the fourth, the flat 3, and then the major 3. Also make sure to add some lovely vibrato to any note that we're going to hang on to for any period of time. So that's round 1 of our progression done. Let's label that A. Now we'll go on to B. Same progression again. Hot on the heels of the last phrase, we're just going to dive right in with another G major lick, thinking minor to major third and root, and then a similar thing 1 octave higher, minor to major third, to the 5th, back to the 3rd, and then the root. It's a nice way of zipping along the fretboard. Little slide along to the minor 3rd with a bend towards the major 3rd. Now we're going to play. So we're thinking G diminished before it's arrived. I'm thinking of this G diminished triad on the top 3 strings. Root, double flat 7, flat and 5th. Now if you've seen my video on diminished chords, or if you have a little background knowledge on it already, you'll know that you can move things around in minor thirds without having to change the shape. And you're inverting that diminished group of notes each time. So we're taking that kind of an idea, we've just kind of seen this G diminished triad here, now we're moving it down 3 frets and we're going to play. So I'm staggering my way down the triad, and instead of just going straight to this note, I'm going chromatically so that we land this, the G note, on beat 1 of the C minor chord. So that again is thinking about chord tones. We know that C minor is coming along, I'm trying to make a beeline for something from a C minor triad. This note would be the 5th. And now that we're here and we're thinking C minor, we can establish this, or visualize this C minor triad on the top 3 strings and do a bit of Hendrixy double stop stuff. Back to just a G blues scale at the end there for the resolving chord. Now onto the C part, same progression again of course. Over the G7, this time we're going to use a bit of major pentatonic. Thinking of this shape here. Bending this B string a semitone. Good bit of vibrato there on the 8th fret. Move the same little shape 3 frets up. Add a little pull off at the end to the 10th fret. So that's kind of a nice little trick. G major pentatonic. Move up 3 frets, and what have you got? G minor pentatonic. It's going to sound good over that diminished, right? Because there's an element of a diminished triad to be found within that shape. Now the C minor comes along again. C minor 6 if we're being specific. We're going to play this lovely little thing. Sounds very vocal if you time that bend just right. Using the root of the C minor and the flat 7. But you can just be thinking G blues scale here, to be honest. Sometimes it's good to paint with broad strokes. And then we're going to continue with more of the same. Come down this group of notes here. It's a G minor triad. Take a step back to the previous note from the minor pentatonic. And then come down the scale. And again resolve to the G major chord, courtesy of this enclosure around the major third and then the root on top. Simple little things like this, coming down the G minor triad as opposed to just running down the scale in order, makes a big difference. Keeps things sounding a little more exciting, a bit more vocal, less linear. Now for part D, we're back to the G7 chord, and I'm visualizing this G major arpeggio and thinking about bringing in things like the 6th, which essentially turns it into a G major pentatonic scale. Again, favouring notes from the G major triad, so it sounds especially apt for the G7 chord that's underneath. Now up next we have the G diminished chord again, and this is where being able to spot just little differences between one chord and another is going to be extremely useful, because you don't always want to have to think of an entire new structure, for example the G diminished 7th arpeggio or the G diminished scale. You just want to be able to see quickly and easily what's changing from the chord you're already on, what you would have to adapt to get something that hints at the next chord, in this case the G diminished. Simply flattening that major third of the G to the B flat, the flattened third, is enough in some ways to hint at that diminished. You know, that's one of the notes from your G diminished chord, but you can be simply thinking about what else it belongs to. In this case, you know, G minor blues scale or G minor pentatonic ticks a lot of the diminished boxes, doesn't it? Because you've got the flat 3 there, you've also got the root, and then on the G string, if you add the blues note, you'd actually have the flattened 5th as well. So you'd have a full diminished triad hidden within the G blues scale organically. It's just a case of being able to spot that and bring it out when it's needed. So the exact phrase that we're going to play very much hones in on that note as the contrasting note from the previous chord. Another one of those cut-offs on the end of that note there, just to give it that vocal quality. And then we play. You'll have seen me use this in a couple of my other studies, country studies usually. This is one of my favourite little minor pentatonic or blues scale tricks. G blues scale, grab the flat 5 or the blue note, bar the top 2 strings at the 3rd fret and hybrid pick and do one of these banjo rolls. Slowed down, pick, 2nd finger, 3rd finger. That's a great thing to work on, by the way. A la Danny Gatton. And then we come down the scale and then get into some of this open string stuff where we're using the 2nd finger to pluck the open G string, where we hammer on from 3 to 5 on the D string. And then a similar thing here, blues notes sliding to the 3rd fret while picking the open G, and then slide into the major 3rd. Again, that's that enclosure around the 3rd. Used quite a bit so far. If you like the sound of this stuff, make sure to check out my Swampy Blues lead study, it's full of it. And to finish section D, very simple minor pentatonic lick. But again, I'm making the effort to bend that minor 3rd towards the major 3rd because we're currently playing over the G major chord and it matches nicely. Now in section E, things are getting a little more complicated, a bit more technical. I do think it's really important to have this kind of a journey or a natural progression of growth throughout your solos. You know, starting fairly simple with a lot more space, and then by the end of your solo you're filling a bit more space, playing with a little more fire in your belly. Now for the first phrase here, I'm very much just thinking G major. mostly just this triad here on string set 2. And then the G diminished comes along. This time we're doing the opposite of the broad strokes approach, and we're actually going to highlight that specific chord with its natural matching scale. So the G diminished 7th as a chord is constructed from a G whole half diminished scale. The name of this scale describes it perfectly, of course, so all you've ever got to do is find your root note G, and then remember to go up a whole step, then a half step. Whole, half, whole, half, whole, half. That's it, the G whole half diminished scale. It's worth learning that a bunch of different ways, like with any scale. My recommendation would be to learn to play it off the low E string first of all, 3rd fret, because that's your G, and then find the scale, just thinking of those intervals, whole half, etc. Get used to how it looks and sounds just along one string, and then start to think about playing it across the strings. And then try and play it in one location. Take the same process off the A string and then also off the D string. Now this D string chunk in some ways is the easiest one to apply because it's so box-like and it's so narrow in range. And there's a beautiful symmetry to the fingering of that shape. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. So in terms of which portions of the shape to learn to apply, that could be a really good one. Now all I'm doing is adding this little slide in from a semitone below, which of course is all part of the scale, F sharp, that would be the semitone below the root. And then when we get to the top E string, we go chromatically. Rather than skipping the 7th fret, I'm going to walk through and grab the 7th fret along the way to the 8th fret. I also used a hammer-on in there if we're being really specific, from 5 to 6 on the G string. And that of course is the root of the C minor chord that's now on top of us, and we're going to play this C minor 6 type of phrase. It's good to be thinking a couple of different things there. C minor 6 arpeggio first and foremost. Where we're targeting the 6th. If you've seen my Mark Ribot studies, you'll have definitely seen me talk in depth about this idea of targeting the 6th on a minor chord. So do check those out if you've not seen them. Another thing that we've spoken about in those videos, which is another way I'd like to look at this here, is not just C minor 6, but be thinking C melodic minor scale. Because that gives you more really colourful tones to play around with and embellish that C minor chord with. Things like the 6th, but also the 9th, which is very pretty sounding when you combine the two. But also things that are spicy, like the major 7th. So again, just to clarify that, over the C minor 6, we're trying to target notes from a C minor 6 arpeggio, and we're using elements of the C melodic minor to embellish around those target notes. Also, some good old chromaticism. Chromatic note below the 6th, same note again but going to the 5th. Notes from the melodic minor scale. And then thinking G major, again as we've used many times in this solo, minor to major 3rd, root. And then we're doing another one of those snappy little horizontal leaps up the fretboard, using the G major pentatonic mostly. Until we get to the end there where we go minor pentatonic, minor 3rd. There's a bit of chicken picking along the way, where you want to pluck a muted B string. So that begins the F section, where we're thinking G7. That would be your flat 7 and your root, and then one of these Hendrixy double stops, thinking G major, top 2 strings of the triad, hammer on to the 17th fret of the B string and go back, and then G diminished comes along and we play this. If you can spot your diminished triad in there, it really helps to get you oriented correctly. Make it a diminished 7th, arpeggio. Hey Louis, you okay? You've not been on camera for a while, have you? Do you want to say hello? There he is. Good boy. You hungry? You want some food? Okay. Okay, he's enjoying his food now. That should keep him out of trouble for a while. So, where were we? Diminished phrase. Now we're heading on to that C minor part of our progression. And we're going to be visualizing this C minor arpeggio. And doing another thing that I've spoken about at depth in all of my Mark Ribot studies, taking that arpeggio and adding the 2 before the flat 3, making it what we call a 1, 2, 3, 5, or in this case 1, 2, flat 3, 5 arpeggio. And here's the exact phrase that we're going to play. Slide into the root from a semitone below, down the arpeggio, the 2, to the root, to the 5th, back to the root, and back down, flat 3, 2, root. And then seeing the G chord come up on the horizon, there's the root, minor to major 3rd again, elements of the G major pentatonic scale. And for the final couple of goes round, we're going to highlight the chord changes and play some really nice choppy rhythmic stuff with them, mostly on the top strings. So a couple of cool little things to point out there. Following this progression from earlier, and then C minor 6 with the 9 on top, and then onto one of these, where we're basically bringing out the same changes again, but in 6ths. Getting very choppy with that right hand. Very similar for the last go round. Get that right hand really loose, try different rhythms there. I'm not sure exactly what I played on the thing, but it's very much that 16th note funk rhythm sort of stuff. And there we have it, a solo based around nothing but the progression of a blues turnaround. The way we harmonise those changes to me sounds kind of gospel in nature, hence the naming of this lesson. Now I just wanted to mention something that I'm sure most of you are already more than aware of. With these lead studies, the intention isn't simply that you learn my solos note for note, although that's really useful of course, to introduce you to new vocabulary and licks and ideas, but the bigger picture is that you take the concepts that I outline in these and apply them yourself. So I really do implore you to do that. That's where you'll get the most value out of these lessons. And that's the way that I learned to play. You know, I'm a self-taught guitar player who's been obsessed with music from, the age of 5. And my method was always to learn things that I loved the sound of, like whether that was solos or riffs or songs, and then figure out the underlying concepts or the underlying shapes, and then apply them myself to my own playing in new ways. You want to recycle these ideas, reshape them, reappropriate them, mold them like putty. That's how you become a great improviser. Okay, on to some tone talk. So let's talk about the tone in the original opening performance portion of this video. For me, this is where tone can be really inspiring. Might be one of my favourite YouTube video tones that I've done so far, to be honest. It was this Carl Longbottom's T16 fully hollow Telecaster with the Radio Shop ID pickups in. I was on the neck pickup the whole time. I was using 3 pedals from the same company, Jam Pedals, one of my favourite companies, has been for years. I was using their Tube Dreamer pedal for the overdrive. It's like a Tube Screamer type of pedal. And I had the gain set really low, maybe 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. I was also using their Retro Vibe pedal, that's like a Univibe clone, that brilliant 60s Hendrix sound, that phasey, chorusy, whooshy goodness. Super chewy, super organic sounding. And I was also using their Delay Llama Extreme pedal, just for a simple little bit of slapback delay. And this was going into my vintage 1969 Fender Deluxe Reverb amp. All original, aside from the speaker, which is a 12-inch Eminence Alessandro. And this is where tone can be so inspiring. It was dialing in that sound and just jamming around for a bit that made me want to play this way and play these things. It can really be a catalyst for good ideas if you've got a sound that you really love and feel expressive with. Now, just in case you're curious and for the sake of being really thorough, in the lesson portion of this video, I was using, same guitar of course, on the neck pickup as well, but I was using the Analog Man Prince of Tone overdrive pedal, and also my Emprise Falcon amp, which sounds very much like that old deluxe reverb. Okay guys, well thanks for joining me again, always a pleasure to hang with you. Hope you've enjoyed this gospel blues turnaround jam, and I hope it's introduced you to some new ideas. Do let me know down in the comments, and don't hesitate to ask any questions whatsoever. Also, please do like and subscribe and share this video with someone that you think might be interested. It makes such a big difference to the future of this channel. Oh, and do remember to check out my Patreon page. I'm sure you'll like what you see there. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon for something completely different. Take care.